Okay, hello, Steven Forrest. I can't believe we're doing this finally, our first
Finally,
podcast together. My name is Linnea, and this is Steven Forrest. And before we jump into this podcast on the first day of Taurus season 2024, I just want to introduce Steve and how the two of us know each other. I've been a student of Steve's for 8 years. He is the author of The Inner Sky and many other international bestsellers in the area of evolutionary astrology, which is a type of astrology that mixes um, metaphysics and the concept of free will into the equation, which we love so much. And Steve is also, for us on the Lila team, known as the Wizard. He is the inspiration for why we started the Lila app 6 years ago together. And I am so excited to pick his brain today about the current Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which is a very big deal for everybody on the planet right now. And we're going to talk about that today. So, welcome, Stephen Forrest.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Linnea.
So, Steve, we've got these two planets in the sky right now, Uranus and Jupiter. Astrologers everywhere are talking about it. What does it mean?
Excellent question. It's a question we're all facing, everybody on the planet right now, because this is like in the energetic weather of the planet at this point. Now, in evolutionary astrology, we never approach any kind of thing in the sky with the attitude, is this good news or is this bad news? It's like we talk about it's always good news. It's always about our evolutionary journey. It's always about an opportunity to learn something, to improve our lives, to deepen our souls, or an opportunity to fail to do that. And there's always a way to make a mess out of anything astrological. I love the English expression to make the dog's breakfast, out of any transit. Now, in this situation, we have what I'll call a transitory meta planet, which sounds intellectually top heavy, but the idea is that when two planets come together, their energies fuse and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And as long as they are together, it's like there's a new energy in the sky, an absence of some familiar energies, and they're replaced with something new and more complicated that opens a door to a higher state of consciousness, and then it closes. Now, in order to dissect this and understand what it really means, we've got to understand Jupiter, and then we have to understand the planet Uranus, or is it Uranus, or is it Uranus? And I love this because isn't it interesting that with every other planet, everybody knows how to say it. Everybody says Mercury, nobody says Mercury. It's like it's totally conventionalized. But whenever you utter the name of this planet, Uranus, somebody thinks you said it wrong. It's guaranteed. And everybody feels a little self-conscious when they're going to mention that planet. This is not even getting into the scatological jokes that all the 12-year-olds understand about Uranus or Uranus. And so the reason I'm saying this is it's not just a footnote. It's the whole point that with this planet, we have to think for ourselves. We have to think originally. We have to be willing to say, even though everybody thinks I'm wrong about this is what I'm going to do. Enjoy. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's amusing. But I don't need your approval. This is a rebel planet. And so if I would ask anybody listening to get in touch with their inner actor for a moment and imagine here's a line you're going to deliver in a play or a movie. Starting today, things are going to be different around here. You just feel that energy, it's like make my day, that's Uranian energy. And in its beautiful form, we have a right to defend our own journeys, a right to defend our own lives, to claim the experiences that are right for us. Ultimately, the brave words are nobody needs anybody's approval. But of course, deep down, we would all like to have other people's approval and will become dancing monkeys to get other people to think we're sexy or important or something like that. And that's the dark side. That's what we have to fight in a Uranian time. So it's about making your life more free tomorrow than it is today. Now, that's one piece of the puzzle. And that planet, I've been saying Uranus ever since I was small. You say it however you want, whatever feels good to you. And this planet's always somewhere. Of course, it's in your natal chart. It's always somewhere by transit. But right now, it's married to Jupiter. And this brings in a whole different energy. And Jupiter, classically, the lucky planet. Immediately we have to be a little careful with that because I've seen people use Jupiter transits to gain 30 pounds. Jupiter is the big yes to life. And, this can be yes to a better future in which I have more confidence in myself and am brave enough to seize my dreams. It can be beautiful like that. Or it can be saying yes to the third margarita or the second bowl of ice cream. It's just yes. And so yes is a beautiful word and kind of a dangerous one. Depends what we're saying yes to. And so with fortune telling astrology, Jupiter's just lucky. In evolutionary astrology, Jupiter raises the question of what does good fortune actually mean for me? What would make me happier? It's like, almost everybody thinks, oh, if only I had money, I'd be happier. It's not the world's most original attitude. I read a survey once some years ago. There was a survey about people who'd won giant contests and like huge amounts of money, become bazillionaires, and like 5 years later, I read 80% of them said they wished it had never happened. And this is not so don't wish for money, but it's like be careful what you ask for, you might get it. That cliche is like the collective human wisdom about Jupiter transits. And so here's the key. With Jupiter, we're talking about how tomorrow might be better than today.
Mhm.
With the planet Uranus, we are also talking about how tomorrow might be better than today. There are different ways with the planet Uranus. It's like, oh, how could I be more myself? How could my life be more my own? With Jupiter, it's how could my life be more abundant? How could I have more of what actually makes me happy in the world? But the key, and here's where we come right to the transitory metaplanet idea. The key is that both of these planets have to do with tomorrow. They
Mm.
both have a future orientation. And so wherever they are in your chart, it's time for a breakthrough into a better tomorrow. Now, I could talk for another hour about this, go through all the aspects and all the houses and all the different possible positions for this thing in a person's chart. But what I've just said is really the foundation for getting it right. It's like think for yourself. That's the Uranian part of it. And then act boldly and believe in yourself. Go for it. There's the Jupiter part of it.
Wow, that was great. So that
Thanks.
when you have it was funny when you were saying those words, I was thinking, I wrote down rebel yes, and I thought, oh, it sounds like rebel yell, but rebel and yes, that 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 feeling. And I've heard you say elsewhere that um that this conjunction, which maybe you can explain this a little bit, how often it happens based on the relative movements of these two planets. And I've heard you say, and I haven't gone to research it yet, but I've heard you say that this sort of configuration always makes the headlines. That there's something big that happens, so to speak. So I'd love for you to speak to how that rebel yes energy turns up. It's going to be different in each sign, and so to speak, but then how we can also see, oh, where do we see that sort of unfolding right now in the world?
Yeah, yeah, well, big questions. First, the planet Uranus takes 84 years to get around the sun. It's a slow one. Jupiter's a lot faster, 12 years. And so you sort of imagine the racing car chasing the bicycle around the horse racetrack. And, Jupiter's the racing car, and it passes Uranus and comes around, catches up from behind pretty quickly. Jupiter back to where it started after 12 years. Uranus has just made 2 more years of progress. And so at 14 years, we have Jupiter finally catching up with Uranus. It's a conjunction that occurs every 14 years. So it's pretty common, relative, as we look at history. Um, in terms of its impact on the headlines, it's a big subject. And in this program, I want to stay true to the Lila spirit and mostly be talking about our individual journeys and how
Mhm.
we can use astrology as our wise friend who talks turkey with us and tells us the truth, the basic Lila philosophy. But let me just give you one example about how it works collectively. The planets came together when the Wright brothers, the inventors of the airplane, were first doing their experiments with gliders and kind of learning how humans were going to fly, which everybody thought was completely absurd and impossible. And so there it is. They're doing that work with Jupiter-Uranus, just leading up to the first powered airplane flight. And then it comes around again. And Charles Lindbergh flies across the Atlantic Ocean, the first aviation journey across the ocean, giant breakthrough, and everybody made a great fuss of him. And then we get a few more cycles, and Apollo 11 lands on the moon.
Mm.
And one of my favorite lines is we went from Kitty Hawk, where the first flight occurred, to the moon in 66 years, which brings us to the age of Aquarius, which is a different subject. There's a major cusp, but these three pulses of breakthrough in terms of humans' ability to take to the skies, were all orchestrated by this conjunction. And it's like Jupiter, we didn't underestimate ourselves, and Uranus, we thought outside the box. What do you mean I can't fly? Hold my beer, watch this. That's kind of the spirit.
I love that. Yeah, the Wright brothers. Okay, that gives me a sense now of, okay, I can feel what this is. Well, that's really exciting. I mean, when you think about sort of the age we're in of invention, and everything that's happening in the world, wow.
Yeah. Think of
How,
artificial intelligence changing
yes,
everything right now. There's one manifestation of it. That's also Pluto entering Aquarius, but
exactly.
it's definitely connected with the Uranian energy. In fact, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. I don't want to get too techy, but Pluto entering Aquarius would sensitize all of humanity to anything going on with the planet Uranus or Uranus or whatever we want to call it. So
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
working
Side by
synergistically.
side. Yeah, we can see how Pluto is working side by side with these two planets, with everything that's happening with AI and Chat GPT, and you hear people constantly saying this came out of nowhere. It came so fast. It wasn't here last year, now it's here, or at least it feels that way, right?
Exactly.
In terms of
That's
the
the Iranian signature.
right, and just the, like you say, like the absurd and impossible being accomplished is definitely a time we're in right now. So how long does so we're talking about world astrology right now, just to sort of set the stage, but I've always found astrology of the world kind of dull, almost, I don't know, mundane. So maybe we can just move on from it So, so it is, I think it is important to point out to people, it's called mundane astrology, but it's actually a study of how these planets impact the collective, the world as a whole, with these events like the Wright brothers. Even though it was two individuals, it affected us globally, not just then, but it still does. We still are
Yes.
using their technology that's been advanced. So I
The
just think,
term mundane has gotten astrology into trouble. In English, of course, if something is mundane, it just means it's everyday, and the implication is it's kind of boring. Mundane astrology, who'd want to study boring astrology, But it's based on the Romance languages, mondo for world in Spanish, and monde in French, and it's basically the Latin word for world. So world astrology. That's what mundane astrology is about.
right.
History, politics,
So this conjunction, this merging, this marriage of these two planets at 21 degrees Taurus. So it's affecting the world, but it's also affecting our own worlds. And as you've pointed out to people, especially if your world has a astrological sensitivity to 21 degrees Taurus, where these two planets are joining for a time. How
yeah.
long are they joining in this, such that if somebody has a planetary configurations at 20, 21, 22, um, how long would any one of us expect the effect or the feeling or the impact to last, so to speak?
Yeah, not much longer now. And each epoch of this conjunction happening, you have to kind of look at the details. As early as July of 2023, last July, the two planets got within 10 degrees of each other, which was close enough to say, okay, they're beginning to interact. And that's like months ago. And Jupiter kind of came up and then turned retrograde and withdrew. Now it's heading back on April 20th. They actually line up. They're really, really close right now. And then the following month in May, I forget the exact date, Jupiter crosses into Gemini. And even though it'll still be pretty close to Uranus, it sort of falls off the cliff as it moves into another energy field. So in this particular one, it started building up last summer, Northern Hemisphere summer, and up and down a bit, heading to a screaming crescendo right now, and then in May falling off the cliff.
May. So that's next month.
Yeah,
So
next week, very soon.
yeah,
I'm
so
sorry, I
this,
don't have the date off the top of my head.
yeah, so it's really we've got about we're recording this on the first day of Taurus 2024, which because of leap year circumstances is falling on April 19th this year. And even on the West Coast of the United States where we are, it happened early in the morning. So it just happened a couple of hours ago. So we're in the last third of April right now. So that means we've got another few weeks of this, I suppose, of being attuned and alert and aware to this energy. As I've heard you say, Jupiter's the planet of good luck, but oftentimes people sort of rest on their laurels and just say, okay, give it to me. But it's more about being alert and aware to where that luck can occur, right?
Yeah, defining luck for ourselves. That goes back to the heart of the matter, the point I was making at the beginning, that I think of like an old gangster movie, and the bad guy has the good guy tied to the chair and says, "Oh, all right, Linnea, if you know what's good for you, and that kind of coercive, if you know what's good for you." But we take the gangster out of it, and
Mm.
we're just left with, if you know what's good for you. And here's the problem: everybody thinks they know what's good for them. And a slight oversimplification here, but everybody thinks getting rich would be good for them, or eating ice cream would be good for them, or having sex would be good for them. And it's not like those are negative things, but we just need a little more Uranian individualized imagination. So, what would really be good for me? What would really make me happier? let's imagine a person, maybe a child grows up in a sort of boringly, upwardly mobile middle class family, and every time that child makes good grades at school, they get taken to McDonald's, and there's a big fuss made of them. And every time they, will play the guitar or sit quietly and say, Mommy, I think an angel whispered in my ear. They get patted on the head and ignored. In other words, a child who's constantly reinforced for conventional success and ignored for every other kind of success. And I hardly have to say anything more. We understand what effect that would have on the personality. That's an example of a distorting influence where we have the nature of that child's soul, but grafted onto it is this social training. And that social training is the enemy in a Uranian time. Or to put it more positively, the purpose of a Uranian event is for the real self to sing with a louder voice. And as that happens, we tend to break out of old patterns. As we do that, well, back to that kid, mom and dad are giving that kid dirty looks, as the child individuates. It's like, wait a minute, we thought you just wanted to make good grades in school and didn't care about angels whispering in your ear back when you were a good child. They probably don't say it quite that way, but that's the implication. And then here we use the clearest lens that astrologers ever have, which is compassion. And we have compassion for that child as we understand the inner struggle where he or she, in a sense, is having to choose but between being true to themselves or mom and dad's love and approval. I mean, oh my God, what a choice. The right choice is be true to myself, but this is where compassion comes in. It's hard to get that right. And then just add one more chapter to this very briefly. Let's say that child is now 47 years old, it's exactly the same dynamic. It applies to adults too.
Yeah. We'll kind of move through the day with is what would really be good for me right now. That's one, that sort of Jupiter one. And then this Uranus one is so important because you brought up the being yourself, and a lot of people say, well, what does that mean? I don't even know, but pointing out that being yourself, this part of Uranus is oftentimes about moving further and further away from mom and dad as we get older and older. And I've literally done that physically. When Uranus was on my Pisces sun, I picked up from Baltimore and I went to Los Angeles. And I've seen, and then when I went through my Uranian opposition last year, I picked up and left Los Angeles and moved out to the country with Ricky, so all these things moving me closer and closer to helping me become who I am. But I'm living a life very, very differently from how I was raised on the East Coast. And I was rewarded for getting good grades and winning spelling bees, and bravo for going to law school, and bravo for becoming a lawyer. But then after a while, I thought, I'm interested in studying law, but not these human laws. I think I need to level up and start studying some other kind of laws here. And that's what led me to this and to the kind of astrology that we study. So I love those questions you posed, because you're right. I realize even in myself, I don't always know what's good for me. And I think I do, or I do think about I'd like to have more money or this or that. But perhaps right now there's a reason why it might be better for me if I don't at this moment. And asking those questions about what should I be focusing on instead of the accumulation of that at this moment. With Jupiter, I want to ask one more question about the nature of Jupiter. We talk about it in terms of luck, and so many people associate it as the ruler of the sign of Sagittarius, which also has that yes energy and just boldly, let's go, optimism, all of that. But I find we forget oftentimes that Jupiter is also a co-ruler of Pisces, which is my sun sign. And in certain anecdotes that I've heard, Jupiter can come in, and someone may say, "Oh, wow, it's going over my ascendant," or "It's going to do this and do that. Oh, what's going to happen? Am I going to win the lottery?" And it will often trigger in the person's life something that they would call a loss or something that they did not want to happen.
Mhm.
Um, I guess how do we navigate? And I could say these question mantras are helpful, but how do we navigate a situation where Jupiter's coming in to actually clear the way for
Mhm.
something better, for a better tomorrow? But sometimes you may not be able to have a better tomorrow unless you lose that job. So
Yeah.
that your time is freed up to move into that next space. So I find sometimes people actually see Jupiter as the opposite. I suppose because so often we have such a negative or a no reaction to any sort of loss, so to speak, bringing in that Piscean or something around that I've noticed that I don't see talked about as much is that Jupiter often looks like loss first before gain, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, perfect sense. And it's a really important point that you're making. Um, so, in the middle of the 19th century, the planet Neptune was discovered. And all the astrologers said, "Oh my God, that sounds just like Pisces." As soon as they started to figure out how Neptune worked, and so let's let Neptune be the ruler of Pisces. And I'd say, yeah, Neptune is resonant with Pisces like crazy, but that didn't erase the Jupiter connection. And a lot of astrologers forget the Jupiter association. So I'm delighted that you bring it up. So the sign Pisces, kind of built into the comment you're making. I just want to make it a little bit clearer for people maybe just beginning with astrology. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So it's about endings. The 12th sign, it would resonate with the 12th house, which traditionally was the house of troubles and loss. Not really the right way to think about it, but at the end of something, something has to die to make way for a new start, to make way for Aries and the first house, the beginning of the new cycle. Loss is absolutely necessary in life. And of course, sometimes we like it and sometimes we don't. Therein lies the rub, so to speak. And so this is kind of the theoretical underpinning with the comment that you made that often during a Jupiter time, where the fortune-telling astrologer is saying, "Get ready for some good luck," and then the client comes back a month later, "I want my money back because my the transmission in my car fell apart and it's going to cost me $1,800 and I'm having to take Uber to work. You call that good luck and I want my money back." But what they're maybe not seeing is that if my transmission hadn't died, I would have gotten in an accident and been paralyzed from the waist down. And of course, we don't know that. And I'd be the first to say it. And I can't prove that, but I think I can say with confidence that the universe works in mysterious ways, that
Yeah.
often things are happening and we have no understanding of it, of what's really going on. Astrology will give us a chance to peek under God's office door sometimes and at least take a guess about what might be going on. A classic formulation, I mean, something that people say after a Jupiter event that entails loss. This is something like a cliche. It's losing that fill in the blank was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mhm.
And, it's an ironical statement. Um, your partner falls in love with somebody else, I mean, a heartbreaking, terrible situation. And 2 years later, you're in a new relationship with somebody who cherishes you. And you wouldn't have gotten there if your partner hadn't left you for somebody else. Uh,
Mhm.
th- these are these are just deeper ways of understanding Jupiter and specifically the Piscean side of Jupiter. It's The bright, plain old dumb luck, good luck, isn't that great? Sagittarian side of Jupiter, that's very real too. But we have to be so careful to not lose sight of this Piscean dimension. I would add, and this is a really serious note, that to navigate that side of Jupiter requires tremendous faith.
Mhm.
You have to sort of believe in life. You have to have faith in something bigger than yourself. Call it whatever you want, God or the mysteries of the universe. But faith. And Jupiter teaches us faith. Jupiter is teaching us about hope. Jupiter is teaching us about gratitude and the maintenance of a positive attitude, no matter what's going on in our lives. These are important spiritual lessons, and Jupiter is the teacher of those lessons.
Hey guys, Janet here from the Lila team. We want to take a moment to say thank you for listening to today's podcast. Step into the grounded, sensual vibes of Taurus season with our latest merch drop. Let's get into the enduring spirit of the bull with cozy sweaters, eye-catching mugs, sleek phone cases, and stylish hats. Each item is crafted to capture the essence of Taurus energy, perfect for yourself or as gifts for fellow bulls. Don't miss out on infusing your life with Taurus flair. Shop now via the link down below in the description. Now let's get back to today's episode with Steven Forrest.
Yeah. Thinking about what you just said, I guess astrology probably my study of it over the past 8 years has given me a greater sense of faith in life, just as this organism and what it's doing, and that it's it it is benevolent, even though things happen that are we would call sad or traumatic. There is I do feel a benevolence to it, and I was able to arrive at that through this study more than going to church in my younger years. And so I just is listening to you, I'm like, gosh, I'm so grateful for the study of this and how it's oriented me and shaped my behavior in the world, because it's reduced the amount of fear I have just for just life out there. And just the chaotic and rough and tumble world that we're in. And that really is that magnificent energy of Jupiter and the power of believing. It makes me think about, I haven't read the Bible extensively, but I have read enough to sort of study what was it about Jesus? Why is he known for being a healer? And as I read about it, I learned that a big part and necessary part of his healing was that he said to the person, do you believe that I can heal you?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that was such a breakthrough when I thought, oh, that's why some people go to a doctor and don't get better, and some people do. In many ways, just in a sort of a big picture way, that is so important to what you're stepping into. Do you believe? Do you have a doubting mind, or do you believe, and orienting yourself? I just it's such a I have such a love for Jupiter energy for
I
providing.
love that. Jump in with one very quick anecdote. Sorry to interrupt, but long story short, I once through wheels turning had a chance to have dinner with Andrew Weil, one of the founders of integrative medicine, and he came to my house and had dinner. We have a friend in common, and one thing I remember vividly from my conversation with him that night. This is just a little quip that he said, but it sunk like a stone into me. He said, "Never have a doctor who doesn't think you can get better." You know, thank you, Andrew. It's faith in ourselves, the universe, and have people around us who have faith in us, and can see a path, or at least believe in a path to a better tomorrow. This is Jupiter energy. And if let's imagine this Uranus Jupiter conjunction is falling on your Venus, in strong aspect of where natal Venus is in your birth chart. And you start going through your mental file of all your friends. And you're starting to think of all the ones who think you can get better, the ones who believe in you, and then the ones who don't.
Hmm.
And maybe it's time for a little bit of weeding of your friends list, in that way. Uranian energy will often operate suddenly and quickly. And in that kind of context, you might wake up one morning and it just realize, Jane isn't my best friend anymore.
Hmm.
I've said she's my best friend for all these years, but I don't feel that way anymore. I don't think she believes in me. I think she wants me to be somebody I'm not, or she thinks I'll always be stuck. And we have these conversations, and I find when I'm in conversation with my best friend Jane, I'm playing my pre-recorded message about everything that's wrong with my life. What is it about her that brings me to do that? Now, I don't want to treat friendships like Kleenex here. Maybe the right response, if again this conjunction is falling on your Venus, is have a talk with Jane, and say, I've noticed something about our interactions, and I'd like to change it. Will you help me? And so maybe we can create a revolution of improvement within the relationship, or maybe we simply need to let it go. And there's that Piscean side of Jupiter, releasing, finishing, letting things be.
Yeah, that Uranus, when it comes into contact with Venus in the chart, I've gone back over my own life, and of course, I'm on my second marriage. My first marriage, Uranus was smack dab on my Venus. And then I started looking at other people's charts, and I saw that active, when Uranus comes into contact with a person's Venus, it's not that you're going to get a divorce necessarily. It's simply if your relationship isn't allowing you to be who you are, it's going to end in divorce, or it's going to end in and that relationship wasn't capable of allowing me to really be who I was. So it needed to change in form, or I felt there wasn't space for me. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't he was the bad guy. It was simply, in order for me to really start becoming who I was, there was going to have to be so much change that he would have felt that the rules were changing so radically to what we had agreed upon of who we were going to be and what we were going to do as a couple, so to speak, those kind of unwritten rules. So when I think about this conjunction happening right now, I do think of a lot of my Taurus friends. People who have the sun sign in Taurus, a lot of them often have Venus in Taurus as well, and Mercury, because they stay so close to the sun. And I even have some people in my mind that I think, okay, they're going through this right now, to their Venus. And I just think like, just send, thoughts to them of, okay, this is a big shakeup, even as it's leading to a better tomorrow, which I feel I went to a better tomorrow. When I was in it, it didn't feel that way. As often Uranus does, the god of earthquakes and lightning bolts. It's usually feels like a roller coaster ride when you're in the middle of it and you're not sure when it's going to end, or what it's going to look like when you get to the end of it.
Yeah, it's rapid change, breakthrough. One of my favorite one-liners in terms of Uranian transits is breakthrough or breakdown.
Mm.
It's going to be one or the other. Earthquakes and lightning bolts, like you said. They change the appearance of the landscape in the blink of an eye.
So might we, if you're willing, might we look at my chart and your chart and see, to bring some of these concepts down to earth, to apply them to real humans, Might we see if this turns up anywhere in my chart where I have a sensitivity, so to speak,
Sure.
and see if we might see anything there to help orient me to where in my life I can be alert to this, and also to sort of be open with those open-ended questions of what's here for me with this.
For sure. So where does 21 degrees of Taurus fall in your chart?
So 21 degrees of Taurus falls just inside the cusp of my fifth house. So I believe the cusp of my fifth house is at 20. So it's it's right there at the start. Natally, I don't have any planets in my fifth house. But I do have a planet at 22 degrees. So that's why I thought maybe we might see
22 degrees of not
20,
of Taurus.
not of Taurus, 22 degree. I have Mars at 22 degrees Cancer in
I
the
see.
seventh house.
That's it.
In the
Yes. Okay.
seventh house.
Got it. Yes.
So we've got this transiting meta planet has moved into my fifth house and is making a sextile aspect to Mars in Cancer in my seventh house.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, that's enough for me to go on. I find sometimes, people will ask me a question like this, but they sort of rattle on and on. They tell me every planet where it is in their chart, what degree it is, and my eyes get glassy, and I can handle two or three concepts at a time. After that, I actually need to be looking at a chart, to pull it in. But you've given me enough to go on. I'm going to start by cheating just
Okay.
just a little bit. And it's just minor cheating. It's because we're friends and I know you, so I know you're the mother of a handsome and brilliant little boy. And so the reason I'm thinking of this is one of the meanings of the fifth house is the house of children. That's probably its most common name, through the history of astrology. I'll quickly say it has a lot of other meanings too, and it'd be fun to get to some of them as well. But let's just start there. And so right away we see it's time for a significant breakthrough, change of attitude, improvement in your life relative to your relationship with little soul. I am, obviously he's not ready to get his driver's license or, go out and get a job. He's still a kid, but I'm thinking that it's time for you to claim a kind of freedom that the mother of an infant can never have, but the mother of a little boy can have. And I feel, it's like just common sense is so supportive of this interpretation. So I'm not going to call it brilliant, but I'm going to express a very high level of confidence in this interpretation. And the evolutionary work for you is to recognize this opportunity to claim a better life for yourself, one that is less defined by constant active mothering, worrying, feeding, nurturing, and leaves a bit more room for yourself. There's a huge piece of it. The sextile to Mars in the seventh house. Now, seventh house, house of marriage, traditionally, it was like we were talking about Venus a few moments ago, ruler of the seventh house. It's really, really important with the seventh house and with Venus not to think narrowly about marriage. It's about all our relationships. Lots of people aren't married or don't have partners. They still have seventh house things. Things go on. So I make that speech because I want to start out talking a little bit about Ricky, but it's not going to just be Ricky. I mean, here you're married to an ex-NFL giant, at Mars in your
Mars
seventh
in the
house.
seventh.
Yeah, it was destiny. You were supposed to marry Mars, and you did. Although he's got a sweetheart for Mr. Mars. But the reason I'm saying this, it's a sextile, supportive aspect, and so I'm thinking part of your conscious response as we use Lila astrology to advise and counsel us rather than to predict for us is that in terms of you claiming more space for yourself, relatively more independence from the mothering of soul, get some help from Ricky. It's sort of in divine order that it's time for him. Good for him, good for soul, good for you, good for everybody. But you may have to play an active role in terms of triggering some change here. I suspect Ricky will be receptive to it. If this conjunction were square your Mars in the seventh house, you might have to do a little negotiation, but it could still work. But in this case, it's a sextile. I would not foresee a problem. Where the counseling comes in is just make sure you do this. Don't sit back and don't expect it to happen automatically. Be the spark plug. Make it happen. I need to take this further because it's not just about the house of children, the fifth house. It has other meanings. The fifth house is it's creative, and so we're seeing the evolutionary need for some creative breakthroughs for you now, for you to make some space in your life, claim aggressively if necessary, space to do something creative. Once again, if you'll forgive me, allow me to cheat and observe. This is the first in what will be a long series of Lila podcasts in our dedicated YouTube channel, and this is creative work. You framed this whole idea. Creativity is not just playing the accordion or something like that, or painting. It's expressing yourself using your imagination, and so the time that you claim back from mothering, the energy coming back from mothering, now we see where it needs to go, into that fifth house theme. Now, probably, in my opinion, the most primal thing we can say about the fifth house, even more basic than children, is joy. Just the sense that it's good to be alive. Now, somebody can yell at you and say, you should be grateful for your life. You should be glad that you're alive. That doesn't help. What helps us feel glad that we're alive is having a good time, having things go our way, having our needs met and our appetites satisfied, and having friends and toys and orgasms and good food and these kinds of things. It's fun. I'm having fun talking about it. But imagine for a moment somebody who has none of that. And we might just feel really sad for well, we always would. And maybe somebody's in a miserable situation, so they have none of that, and they're probably pretty depressed. Maybe somebody just has this brutish attitude, and they say no to everything. And what kind of person is that? They're not happy. And so everything that happens in a chart represents an evolutionary necessity. It needs to happen. It's your soul has this lesson happening. And so, I'd sort of get in your face and say, you need to have more fun. You've been doing this mom thing, for a couple of years now, and you're tired, you're exhausted, and so you need to correct that, so you indulging yourself and being creative. I had a long list of kind of appetites, being satisfied. They're on the list, but creativity gives us joy too. I imagine we go and we hear U2 playing at the Sphere. I guess they've stopped by now, but in the parking lot after the show, everybody's playing air guitar. It just looks like so much fun, to be a rock star. And it's such a simple point that creativity gives us energy, it gives us joy. And here, you need to claim that. You need to make space for that. Once again, sextile to the Mars, get Ricky to support you. He'd probably be happy to do it,
He's that process that you were describing of me starting to create more space. He's that process that you were describing of me starting to create more space, getting to be creative in that space, and Ricky helping out, that's already underway. So I'm like, oh, that's part of this. Okay, I can see that. Like right now, he's babysitting, he's with Soul while we film this so that Soul doesn't come barging in here and saying, hi, Steve, as he does. Hi, Steve.
I miss the little rascal.
I know I know it feels weird to not have him interrupting. But yeah, that whole thing, and he's about to be 3 in this Gemini season, so next month, or in a 40 days or so. And we're gearing up to say, okay, what preschool in the area is good for him. The next door neighbor is coming over and babysitting more. So I'm gradually sort of, it is that Uranus thing, right? I'm seeing it now, when it seems parental stuff, and now I'm the parent, instead of me sort of separating from my parents. Now this is a stage where I'm individuating, we're individuating from each other, from how Soul and I have been the last 3 years. And I've been around him all day, every day. I've only spent one night away from him in 3 years. And even with people coming and assisting, I'm almost always in the same space with him or within a walking distance from him. So there's a lot of like we're really and I enjoyed having that at the start of this, because as you know, I had a few miscarriages before Soul. So I actually didn't think I'd ever be a mom. So when he did come at age 43, I was like, wow, I did it. This is probably going to be the only time I'll ever do this in this lifetime. So I really want to make the most and be around him as much as possible. And he was born during COVID, and it was beautiful. I got to be around him all the time. Unlike my lawyer friends who would give birth and have to come back into our high-rise office within a few months. And I look back and I just think that I could not have done that. That's probably why I had miscarriages, is that would not have worked for how not serious motherhood is for me, but I see that it's a bigger deal for me than for some women. Not that it's more meaningful for me. It just feels like more of a responsibility, or less of ease and joy around it. I feel very that I'm sort of working out some things, being in this position as mother and responsible for another human, when for 43 years I wasn't. And just that big shift that came with my Uranian opposition when he came around for me and Ricky. So it's really interesting to see this. I keep saying to myself, always look to see if something is changing in a parental child dynamic, when Uranus comes in. Now Ricky has a potential theory about this configuration, that he was like, oh, well, maybe, oh, it's your 5th house. Oh, well, maybe you're going to get pregnant again. Maybe we're going to have another one. I'm like,
Ricky will get the assist.
I know, right? So then I thought, oh, well, it could be 2 possibilities. Either Soul and I create individuation from each other simply because he's getting older and we're putting him in the care of other people more, or could a separation come between son and mother because another child comes along?
Yeah.
Who knows? And I can already feel that this experience, if we were to have another one, it would feel different to me this time around, now that I've sort of had a sort of confidence of successfully navigating a pregnancy in the first 3 years of my first child. So who knows? So I only bring it up because at some point we'll come back and revisit and say, okay, what really did happen? Let's see how it did play out, right? We can do a reflection, and I can come back and say, well, this is what happened. But who knows? Who knows, right? I mean, I'm 46, but I'm also a late bloomer. And when I was in the hospital with Sol, I asked the nurses in the maternity ward, I said, so I'm 43. Am I like the oldest mom in here? And they were like, oh God, no. They said, we just had a woman in here in her 60s.
60s. Wow. Yeah, that
And I
happens.
said, and I said, natural? And they said, yeah, she's been married to the same guy for like 35 years, no children the whole time. And then they get pregnant when she's 60 and they had the baby.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
So, not that I'm saying that's going to be me and that I've still got 13, 14 more years of childbearing, but who knows, right? It's kind of fun to think of I always love those books, Choose Your Own Adventure.
I'd
As a
like
kid.
to jump in with that. There's a very basic point about astrology that's built into what you're saying. So just the launching pad here is one possibility, the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction in your house of children is that you get pregnant again. And let me say, there's a future, there's a version of your future in which you have another child.
Right.
That would be very consistent with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. But there's also a future in which you don't have another child, and there's a kind of renaissance in terms of your creativity.
Yeah.
What I was talking about, that's consistent as well. Let me say a terrible thing, and this is not a prediction, a promise, a terrible thing. One of the meanings of the fifth house is house of love affairs. And so, there's a future where, well, you like this Ricky guy, okay, but there's this fellow, and one thing leads to the next, and you have a love affair, which again, I hate to even talk like that, but it's not a prediction, but it would be consistent with the symbols. Now, I could sort of go on and on like this about talking about various things that could happen that would be consistent with the idea of the Uranus-Jupiter conjunction being in your fifth house. Any of them are possible. One of them will happen, based on choices that you make. Which one will happen? Again, it comes back to your own consciousness, choices you make. And this is how astrology actually works, that the symbols represent not infinitely flexible possibilities. It's not that at all. It's more narrowly defined, but it's still a lot of possibilities that are kind of in that quantum field, of potentials. And what will happen, what will actually come into manifestation is not a result of the planets. It's a result of the interaction of your consciousness with the planets. You choose how to do this. Built into this, which I think is the correct model for understanding how astrology works, is a strong argument against making predictions with astrology. It's like, here's what's going to happen to you because this is happening in your fifth house. An astrologer who does that, who picks one of the possibilities, so to speak, will be right sometimes, but will be wrong a lot of the time. And so this is why in the Lila philosophy, we're predicting questions. It's like we're saying there's certain possibilities, certain potentials, certain questions that are pressing at you now. How would you like to answer them? What future would you like to create? Rather than saying, here's the future that's coming down the road. So, fasten your seatbelts and get ready for it. We're not that powerless.
Exactly. I consider these adventures, right? If you want to do this, flip to page 52 and read on. If you want to do this. And so the question before me is, and everyone, is sort of, once you sort of see the realm of possibilities, now the question is, well, which one do I want? Which one do I desire? I think we underestimate the power of thought and emotional driven thought.
Mm-hmm.
When you put the emotion and the desire behind it, and then you repeatedly think about it and focus on it. So for me now, I'm thinking, do I want to focus on imagining a better tomorrow with a second child or a sibling for soul? Or do I want to imagine a better tomorrow where I'm the mother of this one little boy that I'm going to raise for the rest of my life, but I have this space to do creativity on my own without caring for a small child, right? Which one do I want? Which one do I want right now? And which one feels the direction of where I want to go? So I think this is really fascinating, because now I can sort of, it's like, okay, let's choose which one, and I will meditate and I will grow that in me. You know, you grow it inside yourself in a non-physical way, and you keep thinking about it, and then it happens. So it's like what I've heard you say is what you just said now is this isn't about predicting what's going to happen in Linnea's life, but orienting me towards, here's where you're headed, and I can see you doing that. I can see you doing that. Which one do you want to aim at, and go down that path? And it's not about this.
Yeah.
It's switching. It's what you said. It's using your spiritual coaching of me and of other people to flip it from the event happening to me to I get to happen to the event, or I'm a
Mhm.
there's more dancing with it and manipulating the energy in a deliberate, desired way.
Yeah. I want to jump in and build on that. And this, I want to take the Uranian side of this Uranus-Jupiter energy and kind of put it in the spotlight based on what you just said. Now, uh, there historically, socially, there's a lot of pressure on women to be wives and mothers, that the purpose of a woman's life is to have babies, and this attitude is going into extinction before our eyes,
Yes.
obviously right now. I mean, you're 46, and so you remember a world that people 21 years old could not imagine, and I'm 75, so I remember mastodons and brontosauruses, at least culturally speaking, So, the revolution is in progress, but the, the reason I'm saying this is that we could imagine a woman with a chart like yours. This may not be you exactly, who realizes Uranus, Jupiter in her fifth house. I don't want to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks that, if I were a normal woman, of course, I would be desperate to have a child. I think I won't. I think I'll be happier if I'm childless, child-free, as people say. Now, again, I don't mean to advocate that, but I would advocate the idea of somebody thinking for herself, thinking outside the box. It's like, aha, I don't have to accept somebody else's formula for what will make me happy, because deep down inside, I'm thinking, I don't think that's going to make me happy. I'm going to think for myself. And if somebody wants to criticize me for thinking for myself, I hope they enjoy that. Have a nice day, but I am what I am. I'm not going to have your damn baby, I'm
Yeah.
going to be I'm going to play lead guitar in a punk band,
Yeah. I'm surprised I'm talking about this, because it's a little more than I thought I was going to share, but I am ambivalent about this decision, Ricky and I talk about it all the time, and we're like, wow, Soul's almost 3, and the pregnancy experience changed me and changed who I was. It was a relatively uneventful pregnancy. The birth, while it ended up being a cesarean, it ended up being fine. And Soul has been incredibly healthy so far. So when I look at each step, I'm like, wow, just to sit with, I did that, and we did it well, and we did it healthy, and we did it happy, and all those things. And Ricky gave me a question mantra when I was pregnant with Soul. What would it take to give birth to a healthy, happy baby? what would it take to give birth to a healthy, happy baby? And I just said that over and over and over in my mind. Anytime my mind drifted, I went back to that. I must have said it 100,000 times. So I feel like with that thought experiment and that mantra experiment, with the feeling of I really want to have this baby. I've had 3 miscarriages. I'm 43. I really want to have this baby. What would it take to have a healthy, happy baby? And here we are 3 years later, and he never needs to go to the doctor, and he's happy and he's healthy, and all the things that I put in that mantra in my head have happened despite everybody around me being so nervous because I was an older mother and because I'd had miscarriages and all the things that it worked, right? And so now it's like, well, Ricky's sometimes like, why wouldn't we do that again? This child is being raised in a loving home, 2 parents who are very connected to each other and work together and care very much for each other and are on the same page. And he said, and I really enjoy parenting with you of him, right? And that's sort of a new thing for him. So there's this sense of, why wouldn't we do more of that? And, but then there's a part of me that's like, wow, I felt like I was pregnant for 8 years. Like, do I want to do that again? Do I want to do that again? And like, and I'm not going to do the what's it called? The surrogate, right? I would, that wouldn't be interesting to me. So it's just sort of saying, oh, would I want to do it again? And would it be possible that it would feel different this second time around? However, there is a part of me that recognizes that having a child created some slowdown effect on our businesses, no doubt, even though we brought other people in and so to speak. So there's a tremendous ambivalence where I perhaps maybe I should look at it more as either way it's going to be wonderful, right? But I can feel I'm not directing the ship, so to speak. And maybe this whole conversation and this planetary event occurring, pushing into my 5th house, is saying, Linnea, why don't you get a little clarity around this and just sort of make a decision one way or the other? Because if this is the opening to do it, then go for it, then do it. Focus on it, do it like you did the last time. But if you're seeing this opening going in this other direction and that appeals to you, the truth is, Steve, yes, this podcast, I appreciated the moment that it sort of organically happened, but then it happened now. And I thought, it's never just organic on its own. This energy is driving this podcast and is driving Lila as a company to broaden. And it's also leading us to do other things with Lila and to be creative in other ways. In terms of having a merchandise store now and starting all of those things. And it's giving me a lot of creative ideas of things. Of Taurus, of course, I thought to myself, if I'm going to buy new clothes at this point, I'm going to design them. And I'm going to put a Pisces glyph on it. And I'm going to buy that instead of another shirt somewhere else, right? So I'm really getting this bug for creating Taurus-y tactile things in this astrological realm. Sometimes Ricky and I call it archetypal apparel or various things. So that's also underway. And I am aware that now this sort of next iteration of the businesses in the Taurus realm, I would call it, in the e-commerce stuff realm, is exciting to me. And I want to develop it and I want to spearhead it and I want to see where that takes us. And I do see the potential for that to be a whole different world of business and revenue, and so to speak, that we haven't even touched on.
I want to jump in. This is as an astrologer, it's important to not be too directive,
Mhm.
lay the menu out before the person, but let the person make their own choices. Basic kind of astrological technique. But in terms of counseling, like if cutting to the chase here, I notice what you were saying over the last 3 or 4 minutes, talking about creative possibilities. You seem really animated. You seem really excited. You seem really alive. I can feel that Jupiter energy. We cut back a little bit, and this is all on video, so you can check me out. A chapter before that, talking about maybe having another kid. And it's like, yeah, that might be nice. That could be great. And then oh, Lila, and it's like watching a person's energy, as they talk about possibilities. You often get the sense, always, but especially in a Uranus Jupiter time, if they're getting near the path they need to follow, you'll see that fire in them. You'll see that juiciness, and if they're talking about what they really should do, it
Yeah.
just takes a certain heaviness, and you can, the body doesn't lie.
Yeah.
The body knows more about what the soul is thinking often than our shouldsy little minds can figure out.
Yeah. Thank you for reflecting that back to me so I could see that. I I am realizing now as we're talking that on this Taurus topic that I am a second house person, right? I have a lot of planets in the second house. It's a very strong and harmonious place in my chart. And over the last few years, it's been very challenging to be able to make my own money
Yeah.
being a mother. And at first, as a Pisces, I was like, you got to get over that. You got to get more spiritual stuff, thinking about the money, all of that. But now I've really come around and I'm like, no, you know what? That actually is really good for my self-esteem and really good for my sense of energy and how I see myself in the world, and that I'm able to generate resources for myself. Um, and there really are very few hours in the day to be able to prioritize that part of one's life when you have a toddler with you. So this is help. I feel like this is just really helping me get clear on this and start thinking about what do I want to fill my mind with at this time. But the creative thing is, I'm excited it's in my fifth house. I'm excited to see what the creativity manifests into in the physical. We'll see. Sometimes the creativity of a baby coming out is very in line with a new business or an offshoot of a business, right? It's the same thing. So it's like
Yeah,
I
you can't tell them apart astrologically.
it's like another sibling would be a little offshoot of this family thing we got here. But then what I'm talking about with zodiac apparel and so forth is another. So
You'll
um,
give birth to something.
I'm going to give birth to something here this year, or in the coming years. So let's see, right? This has been so great talking with you. We just went down a line with my chart that I wasn't expecting, and so of course I'm just so appreciative for the spiritual counseling you just gave me on this configuration. I do feel like there may be other conversations about this in the future, so stay tuned. We'll report back to people how this turns out, and potentially we can talk with other people about how this is turning up in their charts so we can spiritually counsel and support each other. It helps me to people have heard about it in mine, but I would also love to understand it in the people around me too, so that I can support them through this big change. I would also encourage people to go to our app, to go to the Lila app and check it out, because we do have a transit section where you can find in your profile where Jupiter and Uranus are in respect to your natal planets, and to see if there's a big activation going on right now for you, because for a lot of us it's going on, and it's going to look a little different for everybody, but it's going to be that same feeling of moving towards a better tomorrow and a more optimistic tomorrow that's in line with who we really are, as we're constantly becoming bit by bit over the course of our lives, day by day. So thank you for this, Steve. I look forward to talking with you on the next one and hopefully many, many others to come.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Our guest was Lila's very own co-founder, published author, and astrology wizard, Steven Forrest. Steven Forrest is no fortune teller. In his own words, he practices the astrology of freedom, choice, and imagination. Robert Downey Jr. says, "I marvel at the accuracy of Steven's readings. He insists that nothing is so grave as to be beyond repair, and correspondingly that there is no rainbow that won't be evaporated by poor judgment in the now." Steven has trained professional astrologers on 4 continents. He has authored 16 books, all of them considered classics in the field. He is excited to have joined forces with NFL great Ricky Williams and his team to create Lila, which brings his style of intelligent, choice-centered astrology to a global audience. Don't forget to like today's podcast and subscribe for more.